Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to SP Reviews, where today we're checking out an album by an acts named John Kline, and the album is titled Rixile Elixir. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the art on the screen. I have just figured out that Rixile Elixir, if you flip them around, they're basically the same word and vice versa, so that's cool. We're going to listen through this album in its entirety from start to finish, starting with Neurogenesis, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. What do we got? Oh, great. Got some it's like Tomish kind of drum fills leading us in. And that guitar tone is glorious. It's very pretty, isn't it? There's several layers in there and amongst the pianos as well. Yeah. And there's lots of variation in those 8th and 16th grooves on the drums there with a really sort of uplifting lead line. Can't really ask for anything more than that to start things off. It's very intriguing. The shred's actually pretty impressive. Rolling between some legato techniques and interesting bluesy phrasings. Some also jazzy progressive phrasings here. It's got a nice MIDI tone that gives a bit of presence in the mix without being too overbearing. And a walking bass line underneath, which I'm actually quite impressed with. And it's interesting as well, you've got several different lead lines. You've got like a more of a distorted kind of mid pickup position one. And then you've got like some sort of tapped arpeggios or something like that going on in the background as a backing phrase. There's a lot to appreciate for sure. Great use of sweep picking here. I mean, it's very busy, but the textures are friendly, so it's not really... But we do slow down sometimes, which is great. Just have more of a hook melody phrasing, if that makes sense, in it. What is, you know, I think a multi-instrumental track within a multi-instrumental album, as I understand it. Great way to start a Wednesday, that's for sure. I'm getting some sort of Vi-ish undertones here, which I feel is a compliment. Great use of those 16th triplets, or 30 seconds. Yeah, okay. So what saved us from just becoming like a shred fest is that we alternate the intensities of the phrasings, how complicated they are. For people who may not be as used to hearing as much shred, it does kind of calm and simmer down a little bit, which I like a lot. Are they using a wah filter or something on the lead? Just to kind of smooth out a few of those higher frequencies so they contrast a little bit more with some of the brighter elements in the mix. I mean, it is a longer track, I suppose, you know, at 4 minutes 51, which is it's a brave move for an album opener, you know. Sometimes you want to give a little bit of a taste of what you're about before you give them a big dose like this, but I think the musicianship on display is engaging and impressive enough, you know, that it works out. It's great to have the harmonies at the end. And the piano playing as well was sensational. I'm really happy with the way things are arranged in the mix there. Neurogenesis was a really uplifting experience. It's a very positive first impression, and I look forward to hearing what happens next. That's awesome. So we've got Made at Home, track number 2. So with some country sort of intonations here, which is a big shift from what we had in Neurogenesis. Yep. Great bass tone, by the way. I like the clarity of that in the mix there. Interesting use of the kick on the 2 and 4. Used to those being snares, but we're not using that here, obviously. A point of interest, you know, a little bit of uniqueness to it. And the pianos are so busy as well, alongside the guitars. I like that the drums are taking a step back here to make room for them. Yeah, great dynamic range as well to the drum recording. I'm glad that they're not just kind of keeping it all the same energy the entire time. Having more of a mezzo-piano or a piano feel to this dynamically is a smart move. You can increase it later on, but especially when you've got a mastering chain and YouTube's compression on audio, smart move. It's almost like we've got a call and response with more emphasis put on accents of the notes on the piano when the guitar isn't there, if that makes sense, which does from a compositional and songwriting perspective. Great use of a harp texture here, man. I'm really happy with that. Why am I confusing that for a piano? Never mind, I could just be tripping here. I'll take the L on that one if that's the case. Yeah, lots of these ideas on the guitar with these arpeggios and some of the brighter major chords that intertwine really well with the piano parts. It's like really homely kind of feel of comfort. I'm kind of impressed with how it managed to keep a similar chord progression and bass line for the entire time. Hey, lots of development on the bass, don't get me wrong, but I like the actual root note and the movement of it, tonally, if that makes sense. Part of that comes from varying the phrasing of the various instruments within the mix. And I mean, that snare drum. We're at the end of the song now, which is absolutely wild. That flew by. It felt like a few seconds, not a few minutes. And it's great with the guitar being such a focus to have it play out the song. I think it, made at home. It does sound like you've made it home. Like you're at a place where you can feel safe and cozy and put your legs up and just have a rest. Great track. I think that's the trap of instrumentals is that sometimes if you do not communicate what is written in the title in the song, people can feel a sense of disconnect, and that can loosen or lessen the experience of the track. When someone doesn't have a story to guide them, they're kind of looking to the title of the song for that hope there. And it's fine to be a little bit mysterious, but it's about, at some point giving some sort of thematic or musical resolution to it to connect, so that people feel satisfied. Happy Little Echoes, track number 3. Yep, great pace with the drums there, a little bit more active than what I had previously. Still lots of soft sounds in there, you know, with the guitars and some of the reverb, kind of the filtered synths in the background. It does kind of sound like you're going through space, if that makes sense. You got some sort of like bright, fuzzy, starry nuances there. Oh, great use of the bell ride there. Because there's a constant 16th note groove instantiated by the going down in the background there, whether that's the delay or just the notes that are being played. And it contrasts well with the center clean lead there that's kind of dancing over top of it all. At this point, I'm wondering what we're going to do to fill out the rest of the track. Not because I'm bored, but because this is a 4-minute track, and that's just outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot you usually have for singles or songs. Oh, yep. Nothing wrong with making longer tracks, don't get me wrong, but... Oh, cool. Things are flying around in the stereo field there. Kind of like things orbiting you and passing you by. But what I mean is by the 2 to 4 minute rule, if you have a track that's 2 to 4 minutes, you know, you can probably get away with one theme, one main chord progression, and that will, or one idea, and it'll keep you going, because if you can do enough with it, it'll fascinate the listener. But past that, you've really got to do something with that to kind of make it worth, like, listening to the same bass line 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Even if it's not, like, completely identical, again, there we go. But there are slight changes, of course, in the way we're phrasing things, so it's absolutely fine. Yeah, great distinction there with those intervals. Resolving to something very comfortable. I'm having a great time listening to it, if you hadn't noticed. I've got a bit of a poker face, but... Ah, that was cool. We didn't come in on the first beat there. We had a transition from the 4th to the 2nd beat there with that filler there. Da-da-da-da-da-da-dun. Coming back in, kind of tying things back on that snare. That was a cool trick with the drums. We're a massive fan of like the alternate kind of or economy picks, you know, and we're hitting those notes cleanly, to be fair, so we can definitely get away with it. Wonder what kind of guitar amp they're using, because it's a great tone. It's not too sharp. It's got a good, but it's also got a good distinction to it. I always thought we were going to have a bass solo then. No, we are having a bass solo. There's a cool response between the guitar and bass parts. Yeah. Great. Glad I called it. I like how you can hear each of the bass notes distinctly as well. That's great studio production there. It's difficult to get everything sounding nice and clear on a mix, but they nailed it. Great. Awesome. Because especially with the bass, because the bass, of course, has a penchant for resonant frequencies if you move it too high up in the mix. And if you got to kind of, sometimes you've got to kind of get rid of some mids in there or kind of scoop it a little bit. Not all the way, obviously, but like a little bit to make it sit. But at the same time, it's like trying to still make it not sound too tinny or thin. It's a sweet spot, you know, bit of nuance there. But anyways, that was a great track, you know, happy little echoes. There was lots of echoes in there, reverb and delay parts, so that made sense. And yeah, it sounded pretty positive in general. Professionalism. Rixile Elixir, track number 4. Yep, great. Kind of reminds me of the 80s. Some of the power ballads from that point with the harmonized guitars. No, okay, we're going up the octave, going to register, that's cool. What is that, the chorus? Like a heavy amount of chorus there. I was thinking for a moment there that we were going to eventually kind of like come out of kind of like get more sort of like a legato-ish. It was like a filter that was preventing us from really sort of like unleashing the full force of the shred, but no. Yeah, the shred is phenomenal though. The sweep picks are divine. Yeah, phenomenal musicianship. Like, we clearly understand how to play our instruments. We're very comfortable with our neoclassical, phrasings. Yeah, that was a great little major lift there. We were kind of teasing a bit of tension there with that transition beforehand, that in between chord and the harmony, but that was cool. Great choice. Yeah, so the drums are very busy here. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the drums at this part. The groove is fine. Dun 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 dun. They could have potentially alternated between like the toms and the hi-hat cymbals, like a dun 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 boom 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 boom. You know, like gone between it just for a bit of point of difference there to kind of have a little bit more flexibility in the way the percussion sounds at that bit, just to kind of like contrast with the continuity of some of the lead elements, a bit to the progression, you know. Don't get me wrong, the stick work is fantastic. It's just my 2 cents, you know. Everything else so far has been just on point. Yeah, that was unexpected. I was expecting a big finish down, bow, like with a kick or a crash at the end or something like that, just to kind of let us out. We kind of finished with a rubato-esque kind of thing, slowing down with all the instruments, and then it just kind of was done with the amount of energy that we pent up along the way. It might have been cool to have had like a big finish, but it's okay if we wanted a shorter one. Maybe we just wanted a more refined exit, and that's okay. I think that the musicianship in that track was great. It's just as technical, if not more, than a lot of the other pieces we've had there. So again, everyone involved can definitely play. And I think, for the most part, there were some really interesting ideas there. I'm not necessarily sure what Rixile Elixir means, but it sounds kind of really kind of like kind of funky and kind of like and get interesting. And yeah, if it's like a summation of the rest of the elements of the album, then I'm keen to hear more. But we've got the last track for today, just before I take a short break, because I like to split these larger reviews up into chunks, you know. But this is Friday Song. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with a Friday song. It already sounds like they're pretty grateful for it, if I'm honest. Yeah, sensational. No intro chord coming straight in with those leads there. I love those 16 sequences in the background with those guitars or... Because there's 16 like ghost notes on the snares occasionally. You got like an offbeat accent hi-hat thing going on there, it's 8th note oriented. But like the general coloration of the harmony is beautiful, very vibrant. I also want to give a shout out to the fact that the elements aren't always in the same position of the mix. Occasionally you have the lead on this side or this side a little bit. It's unpredictable and kind of enigmatic in that sense. It's nice to have change and flexibility with the way we approach things to make the more of a journey as opposed to a preset. Nice funky perky bass line. Bum 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 bum. Yeah. It's great. There's no harsh textures despite some of the complexity of some of the chords in this arrangement. The addition of multiple lead elements. And that comes from a fundamental understanding of music theory and composition, you know? Those like trill parts there are glorious. It's a very, it adds a sense of sophistication to it, but also of fun. And kind of like birds or butterflies floating around, you know? There's another guitarist who this reminds me of. It's the guy who did Cliffs of Dover. That's another guitarist that this reminds me of. I can imagine the tone being very similar to what we had in that track, if not basically on point for that. Is it Eric? Is it Eric Johnson? Is that who made that? It is Eric Johnson. I'm glad. I just had to quickly Google that because it was bugging me a little bit, you know? I wonder how we're going to finish this because we've already given a lot of... already given a lot so far within this track. You know, we've got those whole notes of the bass note. There's something. Oh no, we're switching back to the 8th note accent. Staccatos. Cool. No, I'm happy with this so far. I think that it's well done. So yeah, just before I take a break, right? Just between the first and second half of this review, because it'll be in the same video, obviously. I'm really enjoying a lot of what I'm hearing so far at the moment. The ideas that are presented make sense for the song titles for the most part, and the themes that are established are phenomenal. They work really well. I'm very happy with that. I say they're very engaging. There's a lot of complexity to the actual performance itself, which shows a musicianship of everyone involved of a high standard. For the most part, I'm really happy with what's going on with what they're playing specifically. There's little bits I've kind of been like, could we have done that differently? But aside from that, it's great. And I think the studio production in general is solid. I like the tone of the instruments as well. And I think that the lead guitars, with the various kind of ways they're phrasing themselves, make for great lead voices, even if there's more than one at the same time harmonizing. So yeah, good stuff so far. I'll see you soon for part 2. And we're back for the continuation of the review of John Kline's album Rixile Elixir, ending with a Friday song. What do we have next? Agent of Change, apparently. Track number 6. Oh, great job with this kind of jazzy groove on the strings. That walking bass line there with these really beautiful, pristine strings. I like how, despite the amount of intensity, the intricacy of the overall performance, we don't necessarily have any sort of dominant accents or grooves here. It's kind of, well, this kind of big melting pot, if that makes sense. Bum 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 bum. It would be nice to have some space occasionally where we had less going on. I mean, I understand that we want to have that movement there, continuation of that flow, that atmosphere, that environment instantiated at the beginning, but brass? Synth brass? I do like the additional layer though as an instrumental part of the melody there, and how it kind of wafts around the stereo field, you know? Clarity of everything in the mix is great, leveling and EQing and filtering is great. It's nice to have a different lead instrument outside of the guitar parts. I love our 16th triplets. We often crescendo those parts as well, going from nothing to a mid loudness, which I appreciate as well. There's a growth to it. It's like, oh, it takes you by surprise, but in a way that's not too abrupt or harsh. I'm not really sure what to take from this aside from what we're going on with the jazz infusions. I know, like Agent of Change, that kind of swing groove can I know work for like spy soundtracks, spy film soundtracks. Great use of unison bends here to bring it down a little bit, allow it to kind of sing as opposed to shred. Changing the position of panning there to allow things to move around the headphones and continue a solo section without becoming too monotonous. I think the bass guitar there is rolling within the modes of the chord progressions. Right there. It's great the drums are coming down to meet that bass there and give that bass a little bit more presence. The space away from the guitar is so refreshing, you know? It's excellent that we have the drummer here coming in and just kind of flexing a little bit. Yeah, great entrance there. I think that was well deserved. I would have been a little bit sad if we had the guitar come in sooner, because I think it's just, we've had so much of that one type of sound in here. Allowing the percussion to just be alone with the bass, or even having a little drum solo by itself is just so charming and respectable. showing gratitude towards the other musicians that aren't instruments that aren't the lead. Great. No complaints about that whatsoever. Very well done. Just before we get into the next track, I really appreciate that we had like a total nuance with those extensions there in the chords. It was great to not have things be so obvious about the intonation we were going with that track. It was cool to not have things be black and white, but a grey come with those extended chords. But then we got Drive to Mobile. Drive to Mobile? Oh, and the use of an organ? I dig it. There might have been organs earlier, but I'm definitely hearing them now. Yep, great entrance here, makes sense. We've instantiated the main theme. And then verse part, you know? You could have gone a little bit sassy on it. You could have had like a parallel major or a semitonal shift downwards to really spice things up there. But I think keeping it conservative can be good. A little bit of phasing or flanging on those instruments there. It's great. Rolling bass line going along with that 8/16 note groove on the drums there, very supportive. More of the sweepy sweeps. Great roll to it. I mean, I think the lead guitar does serve its purpose here. I think the backing for it is kind of gentle and neutral. Like there's some positive chord, there's some major chord intonations there. But there's also a great deal of space without having any sort of like focus on any sort of awkward notes within the scale shapes that allows you to do basically whatever you want with the guitar parts. As opposed to sevenths where you have like the major seventh so close to the octave that if you hit that root note it's going to sound a little bit dissonant. A great use of tapping here. It's nice that we don't try to combine all the tension all the time. We have separate phrasings there. I think we actually might be using a whammy bar or tremolo bar at this point, which I appreciate. I think if we haven't had that already, it's great to have that here. And returning back to that motif there, great. I'm glad that we're keeping it relatively simple to contrast some of the further development with it melodically in the earlier verse part. I might have been cool to have an organ solo at this point. I can appreciate what we're trying to do there instrumentally, keeping the guitar as the main focal point, but we had the organ mentioned earlier. It would have been nice for it to come back and kind of sing on top. Yeah, and like a call and response, like sort of a rap battle between the two of them going, you know? Just as a change of pace, because we're very familiar, I think, at this point of the album. Like, the organ comes out nicely here at the end. It's a great way to finish. But we're very familiar with having, like, the shred be a focal point, like all of these solo sections here. So it could have been nice to, if you're introducing a new layer there instrumentally, have it play more of a bigger part later on when things have kind of gotten to a point where you're familiar with the motif and need more. But still, good track, Drive to Mobile. It did sound like you're on a mission somewhere, a journey. It's cool. And then Water Song, which I believe is track 8, if I'm not mistaken. Can't believe we're already mostly through this album. It's wild, dude. Just blasting through it, dude. Then again, to be fair, it is a fairly easy album to listen along to and kind of get lost in. Like, if I wasn't reviewing this, I'd happily just listen through it without kind of critically analyzing it. Interesting use for pamphlet. I'm liking the fact we're putting different instruments in as separate leads to kind of sort of zazz things up a little bit. It's really refreshing to not have the guitar be the main sort of like point of interest. It's just a really different sort of texture there that softness and vulnerability works well with the chorused guitar parts panned to the sides. See, I don't mind that the guitars come back now because now we're refamiliarizing ourselves with it. But it's about averting the listener's expectations. Averting the listener's expectations. And there's another word I'm supposed to use there. Subverting the listener's expectations, right? That's it, subverting. Great emphasis on those different sort of like chops on the kit. Some extra crashes there occasionally. It'd be nice for things just to stop. Like for things just to stop. Like, not that I want the song to end, but just like for things to just go bow. And like have the guitar come in dun. Boom, and then go back to the next verse or something like that. Just the ebbs and flows, but like to occasionally just have things just kind of pause, because without those pauses, we just got a sense of constant movement, which again, like on a per track basis, works absolutely fine. Maybe returning back to the original sort of woodwind theme we had at the start, you know? Because I'm curious about how we're going to include that back into proceedings. Keep it this simple. Yeah. It was nice just to have things just kind of hang there for a moment. The drums, they're subtle enough and they're not on your face, and you're able to just kind of like relate to them and be like, okay, yeah, I know that even though he's got some ghost notes and stuff like that, there's still that kind of main sort of like continuous flow of it. And I do like the fact that we're moving away from the traditional straight eights to go towards some da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like triplets there. I think that's cool, groove-wise. Now that was cool. We had the kind of piano or something kind of descending like that, cascading down. And like, to be fair, like from the perspective of someone who is also a guitarist, I understand how difficult it can be to bend those notes at that higher range and get them clean. So shout out for that. That's a fantastic bend there. Like, absolutely no lack of love for the skill level and how clean the notes are coming through within these scale shapes. If there's any constructive criticism I have at this point, I think it's we could potentially make more use of some of the other lead elements we have in the mix to kind of have conversations with the guitars, especially the guitars that are telling most of the story. That's it, everything else is pretty much on point. I mean, like, again, the studio production is damn near flawless. We can hear all the different elements in the mix very clearly. So there's not an issue there. There's the potential for a little more synergy between some of the elements in the later half of the tracks. Yeah, I missed that flute woodwind part at the start. It would have been cool if that came in later on. But it's okay if we wanted to have the start a little bit different to the end. And then we've got To the Sky, track number 9. Yeah, I mean, like the previous track, what was it called? Just before I move onwards. Water Song. Yeah, it did kind of sound like the flow of water. It was very smooth, so I suppose that's it. You kind of had like the woodwinds at the start that sounded like a tribal flute or something like that, like a pan flute or something like that. You could imagine waterfalls and stuff like that. So I get it from a perspective. We've got To the Sky now. What will we do differently in this one? Piano intro, that's cool. Very articulate. Oh, a little bit sort of classical stuff going on there with some of those bits of ornamentation there. The woodwinds are back. Yeah, good. Good man. Good job. Good. Let there not be guitars yet. The reason I say I don't want guitars yet is because I am unfamiliar. I don't know what's going to happen next, and that's really important. Really important that I don't know what happens next, because that makes it more interesting. When you know what to expect, sometimes it's very easy to disengage. But here I'm like, oh, this is different. I don't think we've had this combination of elements for at least for a while. I adore it, actually. It's fantastic. It's very refreshing. Interesting sort of like 16 triplet parts here going on here with some interesting sort of tom fill stuff going on here as well. Yeah, I don't mind that the guitars are coming in now, not only because I like the sound of them, but also because they're building upon what's already been put forward by the keys, you know, the woodwinds, etc. There's a great sense of synergy and a connection between these elements of the mix, of the arrangement. I like how there's harmonies here that sound like they're ascending up to the sky. It's probably one of my favorites off the album, to be honest. I don't even mind this because we've just had so much to kind of build up to this point that like this is getting close to the midway part of the track. So that's that sort of natural bell curve kind of thing you got going on, you know? That kind of getting bigger towards the middle, a little more intense there. So this is sharing like sharing a consistency with a lot of the other stuff we heard in this album. Just from like an overall sort of like vibe. You know, I'm familiar with the arrangement and the different instruments we've got in the mix at this point. We're aware of what they can do on their instruments. We're aware of the fact that we've got different atmospheres per track. but it's the sort of the unison, the combination of what we're hearing outside of that things that makes it familiar. That was a beautiful resolution at the end here. I was expecting something else to come in there at that point. Like, you could have potentially had a more dominant lead part outside of the guitars at this point to kind of make the most of that lead instrument that was at the start alongside the pianos. Although, like, to be fair, like, we are segmenting the track in a way that while it's through composed, but practically it almost sounds like there's like a verse chorus structure to it. You know, so it's good. Very active with the crashes. You know, I have been listening to the high and low tone, floor tone stuff, but very active with the crashes. I'm not necessarily used to that. I don't mind it. What are we doing here? Did we have a filtering or something like that going on there? Because it seemed like the drums became less dominant as we went forward. I could be tripping, to be fair. But that was very elegant. It seemed like two birds kind of spinning around each other into the sky. I can imagine that. The music does display a penchant for being able to link the themes or the sounds to the title there. So that's great, and especially when we have a lack of vocals because it is as an instrumental track. But good stuff. And then finally, Illusion Life Stance, track number 10. Oh, it's very compelling, isn't it? Great with the clean steel string fingerstyle stuff going on with the bass and that the violin. Or is it a cello? Oh, some steel string kind of country blues shred. Bring it on. Sounds like there's a little bit of a mid-range resonance EQ-wise in the guitar on the left as opposed to the right. The guitar on the right, the lead there, kind of floats. There's one on the left that's a little bit thicker sounding. To be fair, I think it's because the bass is on that side though. So that makes sense. There's not the guitar, it's just the fact that the bass and the guitar is on the left side, the lead's on the right. I wonder why that was. I wonder why we wouldn't put the bass in the center. Were we wanting it to sound disconnected? Like the two sides were on opposite sides and they would talk to each other? Because that'd be phenomenal imagery if we had like the guitar on this side slowly come to the other side as if they were kind of reconnecting with each other despite the difficulties. It's fairly neutral there. I mean, like, we have like some major minor triads going on with some extensions there, but I don't know if I necessarily wanted to commit on a central kind of like quote unquote feel to it. Illusion Life Stance, it almost sounds a little bit bittersweet or melancholy, as if it's just a part of life and it's neutral despite all the different ways you might try to read it. Yeah, no, having those strings is a great little addition there in the mid-range. Gives it a bit of size and warmth to it, you know? So we wanted to have the strings on the center, I think, then the bass to be on the left, to give everything its own space in the stereo field. It was an interesting move. Were we worried that like the cello wouldn't be notched enough to allow the bass to go through at the bottom? I mean, considering the studio production, the mixing and mastering, the quality of it for the most part, I would respect that decision. I'm sure it might have been difficult to get them all in the center. Maybe it didn't sound wide enough, you know? Beautiful. Wow, what an album. Because this is my review of the album by John Kline titled Rixile Elixir. What do I think this album is about? I think this is about, if I'm not mistaken, let's put down the set list here on this side. We've got 10 tracks such as Neurogenesis, Made at Home, Happy Little Echoes, Rixile Elixir, Friday Song, Agent of Change, Drive to Mobile, Water Song, To the Sky and Illusion, Life's Dance. I take this album as different concepts that John Kline wanted to explore and sort of make his own sort of take on. There were some tracks that were very, very interesting to me, such as To the Sky. I liked some of those elements there with the sort of classical points there. Water Song had that pan flute at the start or whatever that I wish had continued later on. Without going into that part yet, there were tracks I liked more than others. But from Neurogenesis, from the very first point of the track, we could understand that not only could we really shred our instruments and really play, but we had a set kind of motif that we wanted to show for each of these ideas. I think for the most part, you know, the music did match the title of it. Like Friday Song sounded pretty upbeat and friendly and ready for the weekend. Made at Home sounded nice and warm and like you were safe. Happy Little Echoes did sound upbeat and positive and cheery and stuff like that without being too over the top. So we clearly have a sort of an empathy and understanding of the title and the story we wanted to tell, and we can make that happen with the range of different attributions we have within our music. I spoke about specific parts of these songs throughout the album, so I don't want to sort of like go through all of them in depth at this point. But just as a general overview, I thought each of these tracks had made sense with the way that things were played, the motifs there. Clearly there was a lack of vocals due to the fact that it was a multi-instrumental album. And that's fine. I don't think having a lack of vocals was a detriment here. I don't think we really needed help to understand what was going on. Rixile Elixir was a little bit sort of mysterious to me, but that's fine. That's okay. I don't need to get hand-fed everything to be able to appreciate something. Sometimes I can listen to something, like, for instance, that's in a different language, for example, where I don't understand a story at all, and still be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I think I understand what they're going for. And that's the beauty of music, is that it often transcends a language barrier, provided that it's performed and written and mixed well so that you want to hear it and listen to it and enjoy it. The tracks within this album were typically about 3 to 5 minutes, and I think those were a good range of time. I think any longer than that, and it would have been kind of risky because you run, especially if you've got similar chord progressions throughout, we're not really having massive shifts in like the way things are performed, or like taking instruments out and bringing them back to a degree where it's noticeable or kind of like it's a big change. There were no massive changes within these tracks. There were little sort of inferences of development there, like for example in Water Song we had like the flutes and stuff like that, or like this lead instrument stand, we switched into the guitar. That wasn't a massive shift there in tone. That was just more something of an inevitability. I think I talked about one of some of these tracks to just stop occasionally and just have like pauses there, but I also understand that we wanted to make the most of the time we had within our real estate. We didn't want there to be filler, so I get it. And to be clear, I don't think there was any filler in any of these records, any of these songs within this album. Even though at some points I noted that I want there to be like maybe a little bit less guitar than there was, primarily because we had other lead elements that could substitute for that and they could interact more. For the most part, I think the combination of the bass grooves on the bass guitar, for example, which were fantastic. I really enjoyed listening to the bass in this. Whether it was a walking one, such as an Agents of Change, there were lots of movement there, or whether we were simply sticking with the root notes, or whether we had a little bit of sort of movement around the fret scale shapes and the modes and stuff with the chords relevant to and the chord progression. The bass sounded great, and there were even some solos occasionally, which I enjoyed. There we went to upper ranges there, and it was fantastic to explore that fretboard. The drums were phenomenal. I loved the way they were played there. As my understanding is, with the exception of Agents of Change, the drums were done by Magnus Brandell of Odd Grooves. So that's great, because John Kline basically performed everything else, and to his credit, that is a phenomenal feat. Like, I know nowadays it's a lot easier to kind of, record and make your own music than it was maybe 10 years ago. But to still be able to play the guitar and the keys and the bass and everything like that together and be able to create such intricate, pieces like this is really, really difficult. Because, like, I don't know if you're aware of just how intricate these tracks were. Like, the various solo sections on the guitar combined with Magnus's drum work, again with the exception for Agents of Change, but just the way that some of those really complicated sort of like grooves with their 18th, 16th or sort of swing parts, combined with some of the sort of like lead voicings or the shred solo parts of the guitar, with the keys that came in as well earlier on, especially in the album where we had a lot of sort of like intricacy there. There were a lot of notes and a lot of opportunities to screw it up, and we never seem to. We always seem to have like a really good solid grounding of where we needed to go with the various sort of like overall harmonies, progressions. I think we tried to stay away from overcomplicating the chords and the progressions to be able to allow for a lot more flexibility within those scale shifts. But then occasionally we'd even have slow bluesy or country parts going on where we'd have like chromatics or semitone shuffles there. Lots of sweeping, lots of tapping, lots of really fantastically playing there with a bit of tremolo whammy work as well. It's a display of finesse on an instrument that someone who's been playing for a long time be able to show, and to be able to basically play and compose at that level and record at that level outside of this, fantastic. And I have to hand it to both John and Magnus. Their combination here with their various strengths was an absolute treat to listen to. I would have, again, with the side that I'd like there to be pauses occasionally, I think they still managed to blow me away consistently. And even if there was a relative sameness in regards to perceived loudness there, just simply because of the really tight studio mastering, but also because we had a lot of the instruments a lot of the time with only minor changes in like the way things were affected, especially at that halfway point before the bell curve kind of goes down. Aside from obviously what I mentioned about wanting some of the instruments, other lead instruments, to kind of interact more with the guitar, but that's okay, that's all right. Aside from a little bit more sort of like diversification lead elements, I think that each of these tracks was splendid, and I'm happy that I had the opportunity to listen through them and review them. And I don't think there's a note out of place, and I think that it's a really great first impression to John's work. And I guess with the studio recording, mixing and mastering, it's just worth noting that I was really stoked with it. I think that the guitars, bass, drums, brass, whatever, everything in there was absolutely damn near flawless. I'm really happy with the way things were filtered and cued, notched in the frequency spectrum. One thing I liked is that the lead guitars weren't always in the same place. They'd move around, etc. We had like other instruments come in at unpredictable points to make it seem more organic and sort of like it was a live show or something like that. It didn't seem so sort of sterilized and formulated, if that makes sense, despite the fact that I know a lot of planning would have had to go on to be able to make these tracks as good as they are. I like the fact there were no weird resonance in the frequency spectrum, with the exception of that last track where I was not sure why the bass was with that guitar, so I suppose if that's the only thing, I think having that weird kind of low end resonance there just because of the bass instrument with that left guitar kind of took away from it a bit, because I was more questioning why that was done that way. I think that was to allow more room for the strings in the center of the stereo field, but at the same time I still feel as if the bass should be kept in the center, unless there's a very specific reason for it, like unless it's a tribute to like some of the mono stuff that was released in the 60s and 70s where they did put the bass on one side or the other, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's really cool. Lots of different interesting effects changed there, but nothing to mask the actual instrumental performances there or to improve them. They were raw, organic, and I love them to pieces. I think that there was dynamic range to it, even if I would have liked there to have been like pauses. It's more of a performative thing as opposed to like a studio thing, There was variations to like the loudness of the instruments within the mix. They weren't compressed so that the quiet bits sounded as loud as the loud parts. There was a ceiling instantiated by the limiter, but that was respected with plenty of headroom, and it was nice and loud without pumping. And I mean, effectively, this is my review of John Kline's Rixile Elixir. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via the various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool, stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands Out.